Hello everybody, I'm trying to get things going here. I just got a text from somebody who's trying to get into the class, so I'm trying to get to them, get them into the class here. Let me do this real quick, but I want to welcome everybody else back to the evening. All right, we're almost ready to get to do this. All right. Well, we're gonna get rolling here, and I'll try to manage that. So, like I said, I want to welcome everybody back to the second night of class here. And again, what we're going to talk about in this second class is setting up your camera and using your camera in the field. And so to do that, let's get rolling. So I'm going to hop over to the presentation here and do this. And so you also see I figured out how to put my face up in the upper left hand side of the session tonight. So I can actually talk to you. You can see me while we're going through the presentation. I played around with the software a little bit to figure that out. So, all right, so we've already learned how to plan. That was in the first evening's class. And we're going to learn how to photograph the night sky tonight. And as I said, in the future, we'll come back and talk about processing images. With that in mind, let's do a quick review. And I'm also trying to figure out how to bring up the notes for the YouTube channel. So I can see your chat over here on my other monitor, but I can't interact with it on this monitor. So it'll still work. So I can still use your chat. I can see your chats. Let me say hello over here on the other monitor, just so you all know that I'm here. There we go. So I'm in the chat room over here. So let's review briefly what we talked about on the first evening here on this one slide. We talked about the things to consider when you're planning for the trip into the field. So the first one, of course, was the weather. We talked about the moon phases, the moon rise and set times. We talked about light pollution, how to make sure that where you're going is out of the light pollution. We talked about knowing when the Milky Way core is going to rise and the Milky Way season, and how it's an arch right now, but then it progresses to being a vertical Milky Way in the latter part of the year, and how you might want to choose when to actually go out to a site based on what you want the Milky Way to be in the scene. And I hope you had a chance to play around with some of the tools like Stellarium to begin to understand the mechanics of how the Milky Way progresses through the night sky throughout the year. Right, and that's about the phases. So let's start. Any questions? You can use the chat window next to the screen here. If you have any questions from that first night, I'll be able to answer them for you. So I'll give you a second to use that. And while we're doing that, real briefly, I'm going to email myself a couple of notes to myself on my other computer, so that I can actually drop a couple of links to you all in the chat window. I've got a couple of links I want you to go follow, so let me put those on there. So I'm sending that over to my work computer, which is where I'm watching you guys in the background. So let me send that off. And then we don't have any questions. Great, I guess I did a good job. But let's get rolling, and let's actually close this window because the sun is setting in my office here. I don't want a funny light on myself there. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about how to photograph. We're going to talk about camera settings. We're going to talk about how to focus. We're going to talk about getting the image in the field. And we'll talk a little bit about courtesy when you're in the field, photographing with other photographers, some things to think about so that you're not stepping on their imaging. This is just a little bit of a precursor to some of the rules that, when we're together as a workshop, as a group, or if you go with other folks, just to understand and consider while you're in the field. All right. So with that, and let me put my email away on my other screen and put this away real quick. Okay, so let's talk about the basic camera settings tonight. This is what we're going to talk about. So I promised you earlier that we're going to be in manual. That is manual shutter mode, manual aperture mode, and manual for focus as well. We're going to talk about ISO in a second, a few minutes here, about what to do with ISO, but you're definitely going to have to learn how to use manual mode for all those things, and those are some things you should probably try to learn about with your camera before we go out into the field. You're also going to want to put your camera into RAW imaging mode. Make sure you have enough storage on your storage cards to photograph with RAW, because it does use probably 3 or 4 times the storage of a JPEG. A RAW or RAW plus JPEG, whatever your preferences might be there, but you're going to want to process in RAW. So make sure you've got enough storage on your storage cards. Another thing that we're going to talk about on the next slide is you're going to want to turn off a feature that most of the modern mirrorless cameras have, and many of the DSLR cameras, called in-camera noise reduction. And I'll talk about that on the next slide, but that's another feature that you're going to want to turn off. So when you get done tonight, you might want to go find these things in your camera and learn how to twiddle these things on and off. Know where to find them in your specific menu. Maybe pull out that your camera manual, or go online and find the manual for your camera, so you're familiar with these things, so you're not wasting time in the field trying to fumble around and find this. That'll really make your in-field work progress much faster. The other thing that I talked about as an optional piece of equipment you might want to have would be a remote trigger. But if you don't have a remote trigger, you can always use the shutter delay. Every camera, modern camera now, has a shutter delay, a 2-second, a 5-second, a 10-second shutter delay. It would be the same type of setting that you would use if you want to put your camera on a tripod and jump into the group with your family, for example, at a family gathering. You might set your camera to 10 seconds, hit the shutter, the light blinks, and then you run and get the thing, and then the scene, and then it takes a picture. Same setting. And the idea is that you're going to compose, you're going to hit the shutter, it's going to take a few seconds, and then it's going to wait for all of the vibrations to stop, and then it's going to take a picture, and you're going to get the perfect image that you're looking for. The other thing that if you have a newer camera, you might actually have an app on your phone, and your phone might be able to connect to your camera via a local Wi-Fi or Bluetooth connection, and there you might actually have a remote trigger as well. So you don't need the wire or wireless remote trigger that I suggested you buy in the last class. You can actually use that app, and so that would be another thing also to play with, learn to use before we go out into the field. Is learn how to turn that on, learn how to connect to your camera, practice setting that, and that's a great feature as well, because you can just push the button on your phone without ever touching your camera, change the settings, and again, a good way to do that. Now, the other thing that I have for you is a cheat sheet, and you'll see here the URL that's listed for you to go download this. And here's what I'm going to do while you're maybe trying to find that. I'm going to put this link in the chat here. So let me open up this email that I sent to myself, and let me grab these 2 links. So I'm going to say copy this, and I'm going to go put this in the chat over here for us. So if you look on the chat right now, I sent a couple of links. What happened here? Let's set. So you're going to let me send these links? Why are you complaining? Wouldn't you know it's not going to work, right? Let me try to say it. It might not let me send a. Well, I sent too much text. That's what it is. My chat was too long. All right, let me break this up a little bit. I didn't realize I had to shorten up. Whoops, the wrong email. I apologize for this delay. I had this all figured out, and then I couldn't get the chat window up on my other system. So one more time here. here's the link for the cheat sheet and going into the chat. Let me go here and see if this will let me do this. And let me go here and post that. There you go. So there's the link to the cheat sheet in the chat. And then I'm going to put one more link in here, which is a survey that I'd like to have you fill out. So I'll just put one more in case you decide to leave early. I'd like to ask you to take this survey at the end, and there's a link for the survey. So there's all the good stuff I wanted to give you. All right, so let's get back to this. Okay, so with the basic camera settings, let's go on and learn a little bit about this in-camera noise reduction feature. So I have a couple examples here for a Sony, for a Canon, for a Nikon. There's a feature called in-camera noise reduction. Under Sony, it's called long exposure noise reduction. In Canon, it's called long exposure noise reduction. In Nikon, it's called high ISO noise reduction. You want to turn that off. Find that in your menu system, turn that off. And the reason why you would want to do this twofold. And you don't have to, but it's my suggestion. And the idea is that when you take an image with the noise reduction turned on your camera, what it does is it's going to take two pictures back to back, and then it's going to overlay them in the memory of the camera before it stores it. It's attempting to take two images and actually stack them in the camera memory before it stores it onto your memory card. And the idea is that if you actually have a 20-second exposure, you're going to have to wait 40 seconds for every time you try to take a picture. And that can be just waste some of your time. And I actually think you're going to get better noise reduction in post-production with tools like Topaz or even now Lightroom or Photoshop noise reduction. So there are better tools in post now rather than relying on your camera, and it's just going to double all of your image taking in the field. So that's something that you should see. Now, let's see. Someone said, I don't see the links here. So I should have sent the chat. So you're not seeing the links in the chat that I sent you guys? I posted the links in the chat window. It should be from Mike Oitzman, not from Master of the Milky Way. Huh. I apologize if that's not working. It's the first time I've tried to do that. I'm sorry. Let's go back to the link here. So you just go to the masterofthemilkyway.com. Actually, you can catch it from the main page. It'll say download the cheat sheet, or it's masterofthemilkyway.com/cheat-sheet. Okay. All right. So we're going to go forward here. All right, so I apologize for that. You see hello and survey. Okay, so it's not letting me post the actual link, so it must not have gone through. Huh. It must be filtering links because it doesn't want people to chat and send links. It's YouTube overthinking us here. Darn. I thought that would work, but I guess it's not going to work. And I can't figure out how to bring up the chat window on my other computer. So I apologize for that. I'll have to put the survey link out in another link. If we go over to the browser, and here's the browser window, and you go back to the home page of the Master of the Milky Way. All right, let's load that up. And if you scroll down, it says free settings, download our cheat sheet right here. And you click on this. Then I've got two options for you. One is a printable 8.5 by 11 format, and the other one's a cell phone format. If you do this from your cell phone, you could download and save it into your cell phone memory, or you could get to it from the field as well. So that's how you get to that cheat sheet from the website. Does that help? I hope. Okay. All right, so back to the presentation here. All right, so how to focus in the dark. When we're in the dark, so basically you need to put your lens into manual focus, or I actually have a manual focus lens. That's fine for astrophotography. There's a couple of ways to do this, and I'm going to show you a couple of other tools you can maybe purchase in the next couple of slides. But the first thing is to set your focus out at infinity. Okay, so on your lens, you know, there's infinity, and then there's, you know, the feet or meters for the lens. You would want to start out there at infinity. That's a good place to start. But those lenses aren't very accurate at infinity. They might actually need to move it a few degrees left, you know, around that infinity mark to actually get perfect focus of the stars. So what you need to do is to make sure that your f-stop is wide open, right? And then for your ISO, you turn your ISO to auto ISO, so it makes it as bright as possible, right? If you can't see any stars, that is. And then if you have a DSLR, you'll want to turn on live view. That flips up the mirror, right? So now we're actually looking through the lens, right? Of course, if you have a digital camera, you can look through the digital eyepiece or through the monitor on the back of the screen on the back of your camera. And you want to position the brightest star that you can see in the sky in the middle of your scene, of your camera. And then try to adjust the focus until it's sharp. Now, if your camera has the ability to zoom in, to digitally zoom in, then you also want to apply that and try to get make the star as big as possible so you have the best chance of focusing on that star. So that's, again, another feature you might want to figure out for your camera before we go in the field, is how to do that digital zoom into the scene, and of course, how to get back out of it. Okay, so you adjust the focus till that star is as sharp as can be, and now your camera should be in focus. And this will probably take you 5 minutes the first time, and I'll be out in the field if you go with me on one of the workshops, help you figure this out for your camera. It gets faster every time that you go into the field. All right. And then once you've got it in focus, as I say on the right-hand side here, a good rule then is to use a piece of gaffer tape to lock the focus ring, right? So I always bring some gaffer tape with me into the field. I'll have it with you if you go on a workshop with me. Give you an inch of it. You can put it across so that the focus doesn't change. You don't accidentally grab that while you're moving your camera around and put the camera back out of focus. So that's another good tip to help keep the camera in focus in the field. Then you want to, of course, reset your ISO, undo this digital zoom, right? And you should be ready to start imaging the Milky Way. An alternative to that is you could set your focus while it's light out, right? You could, before it gets dark, look at something in the far off on the horizon, and then get that in focus. Because if you get it on the horizon, then you probably got it. The star should be in focus as well with your lens. Same thing. Put a piece of gaffer tape on it, and then don't touch it until it's time to take pictures of the Milky Way. So this is the best way that we found to focus your camera. And again, good to practice. You could go out at night tonight after it gets dark, because it'll still be dark. It'll be pretty dark tonight, and practice focusing in your front yard, okay, or backyard, wherever you can see the sky. And you just have to be able to see a star off in the distance, or even you could practice focusing on some light on the hill on the far away. It depends on what you can see from your yard, right? Some other options. There's a filter by a company called Sharp Star. It's a focusing aid by Lonely Speck. Sharp Star is the name of it. Lonely Speck is the manufacturer of it. It's similar to the way that they focus telescopes. Okay, it's a filter that has this little grid line on it. You put it in front of your camera, and let's see if I click on this. You can watch this little thing run down here on the screen, and you focus until this star, the line that is going back and forth, is right in the middle of the crosshair. So it makes a couple of crosshairs on the brightest stars in the scene, and as you bring it into focus, that vertical line moves left or right, and when it's right in the middle, your camera is in focus. All right, it's under $100. It only works for wide-angle cameras. They tell you exactly what focal lengths it goes up to. I think to about 50. Doesn't work on longer focal lengths. So that's an important thing. You got to choose the right one there, for your camera lens. There's another one called Focus on Stars, similar to that as well. This is created just for wide-angle cameras. It ships from the EU, so it would take a week or two to get here. You won't get this by Friday. And it also works on super wide angle lenses as well. Similar idea. The website's called focusonstars.com if you want to check that out. So a couple of focus aids if you find it difficult to focus your camera in the field on the stars. Now, one more tip that I'll have for you, which is what I employ, is I've got a special lens. I have this Samyang. It's the 24 millimeter f1.8 FE, and I know the light's sort of bad here. I'll try to put it over here so you can see this little button. It has the button on the side of it. All right, let me put it higher where it's in front. It has a little button on the side of it, and when this is on my camera, basically I hold this button on when I turn on my camera, and it puts it into this special mode where it's been factory calibrated to infinity for sharp stars. This is their astrophotography lens, and it automatically focuses, and then a green light comes on right next to the button and tells me that this lens is perfectly in focus. And if I take the knob and turn it a little bit, this goes red. And so then all I have to do is turn off my camera, turn it back on while holding the button until the green light comes on, and then it's back in focus. So this is the only lens I know that does that. That's why I bought it. It's a super cool little feature because literally, I've got, as we're going to learn now, all the settings for your camera. I have them stored in a memory slot on my dial. M1 is my astrophotography settings. So I turn the dial to M1 with this lens on my camera. I turn on my camera, and literally within about 3 seconds, I'm ready to start imaging the Milky Way. I just have to compose the scene and start going. My camera is completely set up. So again, this works on Sony. I don't know if they're making it for any other camera bodies, but they definitely make it for Sony. It's the Samyang 24 millimeter 1.8 FE astrophotography lens. And if you go search B&H or Amazon, you'll be able to find it. All right. Oh, all right. So now on to the next thing here. So that's how you get your camera in focus. And again, it takes some practice. The next hurdle to get over is composing in the dark, right? So it's dark outside. You may not be able to see what's in front of you other than what you can light up with your flashlight. And so to compose in the dark, to get the horizon set, here's what you need to do. Now, my tip here is, again, putting the ISO into auto ISO lets it go to the maximum that your camera will allow. Opening the aperture to the lowest f-stop to let in the most light. And then just take a real short exposure, 3 to 5 seconds, right? Take that test shot and then look at it in your camera or on the screen on the back, and then make some adjustments. Do you need to scoot it around? Do you need to change the orientation to level it? You'll get an image that you won't want to keep, but it might look like this image on the right-hand side here. It'll be real grainy, but it's enough for you with the auto ISO to actually light up the foreground for you. So, of course, the alternative is to take a 30-second exposure, but who wants to wait 30 seconds just to check the composition, right? 30 seconds will also probably light up enough light for the foreground. But this is the best way to do this quickly as you're trying to figure out where do you want to position your camera. You might be moving your tripod around. You might be repositioning your body with your camera and tripod to find the foreground orientation that you want. So this is the second tip here for composing. Again, use auto ISO and then take a real short exposure time, 3 to 5 seconds. You figure out what it needs. Take a test shot, recompose and repeat. And then, of course, reset the camera. Reset your auto ISO after you've done this once you've got everything composed and in focus for your scene. All right. So now we got it focused. We've got it composed. Now, how do we expose? That's the third part here. And this is where that cheat sheet comes into play. And so I talk about all of this, how to focus and the camera settings on the cheat sheet. You can see it there. And here's the exposure rules that you need to follow. And the first step 1, is to set your f-stop to the widest possible for your lens. Okay? And again, we're not going to be on auto exposure. This is why we're in manual mode, right? So you want to set it to the widest for your lens. And again, that could be 1.8 for a really fast lens. It could be 5.6 for a kit lens. but set it to the widest possible for your lens, okay? And then we're going to leave that alone for now. I'll come back with some other tips later in the discussion about why you might want to stop down, but set it to the widest to begin with. Then for the shutter, we're going to set the shutter to a fixed shutter speed. And the thing here about learning the shutter speed, once you figure this out for your camera, it doesn't matter, it matters what lens you put on it, for your camera and lens setup, then that will always be the shutter speed. You won't need to change that shutter speed. So the rules are the f-stop's fixed, the shutter's fixed. The only variable that you have to play with after this then is your ISO. And we're going to let the ISO bump up until we're gathering the right amount of data for the image. Okay, so this goes against everything you might have learned about landscape photography, portraiture, all that kind of stuff. You know, an ISO of 3200, whoa. So the idea is that we do learn to play with ISO. That's the one variable we have to get more data, you know, into our image. Okay, and for shutter we use the 500 rule as a basic starting point, right? And that says that a couple of things. So we take 500 and we divide it by the lens in millimeters. So, and I'll talk about the crop factor in a second. So very simply, if you have a full frame camera, full frame has a crop factor of 1, okay? And so if you have a 50 millimeter lens, simple math here, let's do the simple math, Mike. A 50 millimeter lens with a full frame camera, 500 divided by 50 is what? 10 seconds. So it says that we can set the shutter to 10 seconds and we'll be able to capture an image of the Milky Way that looks great. Okay, now the problem is if you go longer than 10 seconds, based on this calculation, the stars will start to move and they'll begin to smear in your scene. Okay, now the crop factor comes in the denominator of the calculation here. So if you have a crop camera, you need to know what the crop factor is for your camera. For my old Sony a6000, it was 1.6. So I would have to do the math here. I would have to take the lens 50 millimeters times 1.6, right? And then divide that value from 500, and then that would tell me what my seconds would be for the shutter speed. Now, if you don't like doing math, there's always charts and tables available here, right? So here's an example that I found somewhere for compact cameras like my Sony with a 1.6 equivalent and a 16 millimeter lens. So 16 millimeters times 1.6 is 26 millimeters. And so you come over to the chart and you find 26 millimeters on the line down here. You look over at the 500 rule. It says 19 seconds, or actually 20 seconds, maybe a little bit more. Maybe you want to go underneath of that to 15 seconds. I don't know where your camera will stop at. But it says, basically it says after 19 seconds, the stars are going to start to smear. Now the next to this is the 200 rule. And this basically says that if you're going to blow the image way up, that 500 rule might not be enough. So the 500 rule works great for social media. No one will be able to see smeary stars with the 500 rule on the small screens. But if you want to blow this up to 16 by 20 or some big image, you actually might see some smearing of some of the stars. It might be a little bit out of focus. So the 200 rule is another way to do that. So 200 divided by 26 is 8. So that says that if you actually stop at 8, you should be able to have enough good image so that you could blow this up to wall size and your star should still be sharp. Okay? So that's the chart here. Now, of course, there's technology to make this a little bit easier within PhotoPills. PhotoPills, we talked about this in the first class, has a function for this. On the main screen, there's a button called Spot Stars. And if you click on that, it opens up the Spot Stars submenu. And in that submenu, you tell the application exactly what camera you have, what your camera model is. I've got a Sony a7 Mark IV now, so I'll You pick the camera out of a huge list. Every camera is in there. I've never found a camera that's not in there. You pick the lens, you pick the f-stop, and then you got to pick you can change the accuracy of it to what you want, and then it gives you the 500 rule, the classic rule, 21 seconds for social media, and then it has this NPF rule, which is what it calls essentially the 200 equivalency, but it also takes into effect the pixel size of the pixels on your sensor in your camera model. So it's better than that 200, more accurate than that 200 rule. This is absolutely the limit of what you want to do for enlarging your image to big size. So it says basically for my new camera, that Samyang lens, which I just showed you, 5 seconds for enlarging, 21 seconds for social media. All right. So that's what you need to calculate. I will have photo pills with me on my phone. If you're going out with me one of the Fridays coming up, we'll put your camera in here, help you figure this out if you haven't done it already by the time you get out there. Okay, so I'll help you know exactly what the limit should be. So now we're equipped with everything we need to know, right? We know we've focused, we've set our f-stop, we've figured out the shutter speed. Now it's time to get the right shot. I still like to underexpose, you know, by 0.07, 0.03, so a third or 2/3 of a shot. So I will actually set my camera settings to automatically underexpose because I like to be darker than brighter. And then, you know, always check your first couple of shots, right? You'll take the first couple of shots. You want to do some pixel peeping, zooming in, making sure that you got everything set. And you want to make sure that the stars are sharp, right? I've also heard you can get a little magnifier loop that you can put on the back of your, depending on where you're wearing glasses or whatever, to zoom in as well on your screen. Or again, you could export the image to your tablet or smartphone if you have one of those connection apps to your phone and zoom in on there and look at it as well. Okay. So let's talk about what some good and bad images might look like. And again, I'm trying to equip you to get a good sense in the field of whether you're capturing good data. And so here's what an unprocessed image might look like. In fact, this is from the first night that I actually went out and took Milky Way pictures with my old Canon T1i. And so this was out at Blue Lake, which is in Nevada County. And this was one of those first images, right? And I had somebody helping me learn how to do this. You know, it was f2.8 kit lens, not a kit lens, that Rokinon 10mm f2.8. It was a shutter speed of 34 seconds with an ISO 3200. And you see the image on the left, unprocessed, that hasn't been processed. And on the right-hand side, you see the histogram, right? And so this is almost an ideal histogram and we're going to talk about this in the next couple of slides. You can see most of the pixels are stacked against the left-hand side because there's a lot of dark pixels in this image. And then you've got a little valley, and then you've got one hump, and then that falls down over to the right. All the stars are off to the right there. You know, stars have different color. They're not just white. They are blue, and they're, you know, some tones of yellow, green, and one other but they'll all be spread out pretty low because there's not many white pixels in the scene. And we'll talk about more how to dissect this in just a second. Okay, here's an unprocessed image as well, taken in Downeyville. You can see a little bit of light pollution coming up from Downeyville, but focusing on the scene above Downeyville. This was the second generation of my photography with my Sony a6000. That's a Sigma 16mm f1.4 lens, a shutter speed of 6 seconds, and an ISO of 1600. You can see this image is a little bit underexposed, and you can actually see the Milky Way is a little dark in there. But these images actually came out pretty good. After processing, I was able to stretch the data to the right, you know, in Lightroom to bring out the Milky Way core. All right. In fact, there's what it looks like. So after taking that unprocessed image into Lightroom and playing with it, I was able to get the processed image, the basic processed image, as you see on the right. There's no dodging and burning. This is just some basic processing to increase the exposure, what have you. And you can see how the histogram changed from the in camera on the left to what we got in Lightroom, on the right hand side. And that's what you'll be attempting to do as you're processing it. Spread those pixels out. All right. Here's another example before and after processing. An image taken out at Vista Point, not where we're going, but the actual Vista Point that overlooks the Sierra Buttes on Highway 20 near Washington. This image on the left in camera looked like what you see on the left, right? And after processing, I actually moved those pixels back around to darken it up, and you can see here that's what the image looked like on the right. Again, 13 seconds at ISO 3200, just to give you an idea of how you might push, the image around. Now this was taken with a Sony 1.4 GM, which is an excellent lens from Sony, right? So a good Milky Way histogram. This is why you might want to turn on the histogram feature of your camera while you're out in the field or reviewing your images. You're going to have that first peak on the left, which is dark sky, followed by a valley, followed by a peak, the second peak, which is all of your foreground and light pollution, right? And then that's followed by all the stars out there on the lowlands. And so you want to expose to the left. Okay, you don't want the peak in the field to be, past that middle center line. You want to try expose, so that you've got dark pixels and light pixels. So it looks something like this while you're in the field. Okay. Here's an example of a bad image. And this image is bad because it was taken for too long. So this was taken out at Island Lake, up out in the Grouse Ridge area. I was backpacking out there few years back. I wanted to get an image of the Milky Way over the lake from the island, but you can see that while the foreground looks great, the sky doesn't look great, and by zooming in you can see how it's got this star smear. This was taken for 120 seconds at 3200 on that Canon T1i, and you can see what the resulting histogram looked like for this image. Okay, and there's an example where the ISO is too low. Okay, so in this one, even though it was taken for 30 seconds, and this is what I promised you in the first class, if you're not going to be taking long low ISO images. Even at ISO 500, all those pixels are stacked up over to the left, clipped. This would not process very well in post, and in fact it didn't, but that's what it looked like. Okay, so that's basically it for some tips and tools to help prepare you for going into the field, and you've got a little bit of homework to do to get to know your camera, to get it set up, and of course you can email me between now and Friday night if you're going out with me on Friday night if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer those questions before we get in the field. Once we're in the field, though, a couple of things to understand about courtesy as a group. If you're out by yourself, have at it, do whatever you want. But when you've got others, the most important thing is that we'll all be hitting the shutter button at different times, right? So if you ever need to turn on your light for any reason, you drop something, you need to check a settings on your camera, you need to shout out and say, hey, I need to turn on my light. Can I do that? Is anybody exposing? And someone might say, yeah, I got 10 seconds left, or I got 30 seconds or whatever. And so give everybody the courtesy of telling them you're going to turn on your light before you do it, because if you turn on your light while someone's exposing, you'll get what you see in this scene on the left here, is your light will light up the foreground for their image. And this is where I talked about the concept of the debate now in astrophotography about whether red lights are good, because this one was lit with a red light. It's given the trees that red light hue, and it would be impossible to get that red light hue out of the foreground in post. Whereas if it was lit with a white light, it's pretty easy to knock down the exposure and do some other things in post to still get a decent foreground, even if there's some light bleeding from a white light. Okay. In fact, if you have any lights on your camera gear that are red, like the blinker to the 10-second countdown, we'll put a piece of gaffer's tape over that, because that can also bleed into the scene. So we'll be looking for that as everybody gets out in the field. And as I said, I come equipped with gaffer's tape. We'll tape up your camera lights so there's no bleeding while people are exposing, right? Keep your lights off, I said, while they're exposing. If we want to light paint, which we may want to do, just so you can see how that works. We'll do that as a group. So we'll say, okay, we're going to light paint this tree or this rock or this arch. Everybody get your settings ready, and then someone will be designated, or a few people will be designated to do the light painting. And then we'll say, okay, ready, go. Everybody starts their exposure, and then one person does the light painting and then waits until everybody's exposure are done. Then you guys look at your camera, and then we try it again. Now, the light painting is a hit or miss situation, right? You don't know how much to leave the light open. In fact, if you got different exposure times, 5 seconds versus 20 seconds, you might have to break that up, because the person who's exposing for 5 seconds might not need as much light on the foreground as someone longer, or vice versa, right? So those are all things to worry about. The other thing is to not walk in front of other photographers while they're exposing. So again, just being aware of who's around you. You know, when you're a group, we get lined up. People have different focal lengths. They need to be further away. That's the other thing. If you need to get close, we might need to work in some stages so you're not in somebody else's scene. Although, you know, that doesn't ruin your scene necessarily. You can remove somebody who might be in front of you, you know, in post, with some of the great features now in Photoshop. But again, these are the basic rules. The other rule with the Washington, in fact, both sites that we're going to here with the dam and with Washington, is that depending on how you pull into the parking lot, your lights might be where we're going to be setting up our cameras. So if you decide to leave early, the other courtesy is to make sure that your headlights are turned off when you turn on your car, back out, and then don't turn on your lights until you know your headlights are pointed up the road, kind of thing. So that's another good courtesy, or at least let people know you're leaving. You're going to turn on the lights, and everybody can stop exposing, close their eyes for a minute while you turn on the car and leave. So another courtesy element when we're as a group. All right, so here's just a review of what we learned tonight and what you'll find to remember. F-stop the widest possible for your lens. Shutter speed using the 500 rule or photo pills to figure out what it is. Once you get it figured out, write it down, set it in your camera, set a memory setting for it, because that'll never change for that given lens combination. Now, if you change lenses, you'll have a different shutter speed shutter setting, right? And then with ISO, you're just going to have to bracket this. Again, you're going to have to learn what gives you the best for your sensor. So ISO, I suggest starting at 1600 and then going to 3200, maybe even up to 6400. Take data, bracket the data with the ISO. So you want to bracket your ISO, especially the first couple nights that you go out. So you get lots of data at each of those different ISOs, and then bring that data back, process it, and then in post, figure out which ISO you like. And then again, once you figure that out, that'll be your starting point the next time that you go out. So, and again, you'll want to dial that in, write it down, leave it on a note in your phone, so whatever you need to do to remember that, so you know where to start the next time you get out there. Now, I promised you about there might be a time you want to change the f-stop off of the wide open, right? And this is the issue that if in post, you're finding that you're getting a lot of what's it? Fraction. The word I'm missing the right word. I had the word and I forgot it. The stars might have some artifacts around them, some purple fringing on the stars. All right. So that purple fringing is an optical problem based on the coatings on your lens, and so if you're finding fringing with around the stars when you're looking at it in post, then you can sometimes get away from that by stopping down your lens. So going from 1.8 to 2 or 2.4 to that kind of thing. Just a couple stops off a wide open typically will fix that on most of the lenses that have a fringing problem on the stars. So again, it's something to figure out with your equipment. The first night that we go out, I'm going to encourage you to take tons of different images at different exposures, so that you come back with lots of data, lots of images to process and post to figure out what's the best setup for your camera. Okay, you don't want to just take a couple of images, 5 images, and come home, because you'll be disappointed, right? So even though we're standing out there, you know, you could even, if you have an intervalvometer on your camera, you could turn on, you know, a series and take 10 images every time you start an exposure, so that you get lots of data, right? All right, so here's the last couple things. To get a PDF of these presentations, there's 2 ways you can get a PDF digital copy of the class presentations. The first way is to subscribe to my newsletter. So I'm offering this as a free gift. Thank you for subscribing to the newsletter on the website. The welcome email will include a link where you can download the PDF file as a thank you. Or you can attend one of my field trips. If you attend one of the field trips, all the attendees will receive a link to download the PDFs in the trip details notification. So for the folks coming out on Friday, I'm going to send another email here in the next 24 hours with final details about what to expect. In that will be a link to download the PDFs. Okay, so that's it. The next step is to see you in the field. Are there any questions? I'm looking over at the chat here. I haven't seen any questions, but if you have any questions, now would be the time to ask them so that I can answer them. I wish I could send you the survey. I can't. I'll send the survey to at least the folks that are going out on the workshop. So hopefully you can help give me some feedback about the class. A few of you sent me emails after the last class, so thank you very much for your feedback. I appreciate that. So that's the other way you could just give me your impressions of the class as to whether it met your expectations. Just drop me an email, mike@masterofthemilkyway.com. All right, that's all I have for you tonight. I want to thank you for your attention. Thank you for following me. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Join the newsletter if you want to stay in touch for all of the great trips that are in the planning stages right now for the rest of the year. We've got the 2 field trips the next 2 Fridays, and then I've got lots of fun things that are in flight right now, trying to finalize all the details and permissions to get us some great images in the next 4 to 5 months. With that, I'll say goodbye, and I will see you out in the photograph